Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. I'm Ani Anderson.
And I'm Brian Trzaskos. Join us as we explore the science
and art of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools.
Strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional.
Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence.
If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started. Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. Ani, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
So good.
Yeah?
So great. So excited.
Yeah?
Ready to podcast.
Okay, let's do it.
I love podcasting.
It's great.
I love all things podcasting.
Great. Why? What's going on?
I just do.
Okay.
Conversations, connecting, sharing, listening.
Love it. You've got so much enthusiasm.
All good stuff.
It's great.
Yep.
Well, let's go.
And we're storying today.
We are storying today.
We're doing some case studies today that we talk about in the Manifestation for Dummies book.
Yeah. And hey, if you haven't pre-ordered your copy of Manifestation for Dummies, you can go to our website, somaticcoachingacademy.com, and do that. One of the bonuses that you'll get when you go to our website and order the book is an event that we have coming up on July 1st, 2026, where we will actually be sharing even more case studies. And we're going to have people join us. So you'll actually hear from the people who are doing the manifesting themselves. So that event is Manifestation in Motion, Real Stories, Real Results. You'll get an opportunity to spend some time with us, hear manifestation stories, and we'll be able to look at them and look at some of the aspects of the manifestation as they happen. It's going to be really fun. So you get a ticket to that when you purchase your copy, pre-order your copy of Manifestation for Dummies, and go to our site and make sure that you get your bonuses. So this is just a little preview of that today.
Yeah, it's a little sampler, little teaser of some case studies that will help your manifestation process as well. I always think about when I started diving into the ideas of conscious creation, manifestation, creating the life that I wanted. It was really helpful to just hear stories and examples of what other people, not only the inspiring results that they got in their life. I mean, I think there's a lot of value in that. And when you hear an inspiring story and like, oh my God, that sounds so incredible. I'd love to be able to get that result also. But what I really liked was also kind of looking at the mechanics of what decisions did they make? What choices did they make? What mindsets did they have? All those kinds of things in terms of helping them to create what they had intended to create. I always thought that was really fascinating too.
I like to hear the stories because I like to know what I'm in for. So like you were saying, it's not, I mean, the aspirational quality of it's one thing, but I also I want to hear all the tea, all the stuff about the story. I don't just want to hear, I went from 0 to 60 and yay. I want to hear what happened in the middle. Because I don't know, maybe that's part of my female hypervigilance conditioning happening. But I want to know what I'm in for as a part of the process. And maybe so that I can see things as they're coming down my own path or have maybe an easier process with it when it's happening with me. Yeah, I just like to hear about stuff ahead of time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating.
What are you thinking about?
No, I'm kind of just smirking a little bit because I'm hearkening back to my mountaineering days, mountaineering and rock climbing days. And part of the inspirational stories that people would share when I would go to listen to talks from famous climbers or climbers who had, let's just say, experiences in the mountains,
scary stuff
who could be called
Is that what you mean?
incidences and of suffering and that kind of stuff. And that was really compelling to me.
That was compelling?
Yeah. They're like,
You're
wow, they were
crazy.
suffering on that mountain. Like, I want to experience what's that like to
my
be
gosh.
caught in the dark or in a lightning storm or be freezing. And I always I just wanted to know what that experience was like. And I always felt like, wow, what a transformational thing that happens when you have that kind of experience. And I don't know, is that what you were listening for when you want to hear all the details?
Well, I mean, part of it, although when I'm listening to you say that, I think part of it's you have you ever listen to a really juicy story, and maybe you and I do not share this idea. So for
I was
me,
just curious
for
what you're
me,
listening for.
when I'm like reading a good book or whatever, I'm like, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen next. Or it's almost like if you pass an ambulance on the highway, you kind of got to look and see what happened. Like there's some kind of like draw to human drama that kind of goes on. There's like that draw to human drama that's so
Yeah.
interesting and intriguing, but also I don't want it to happen to me. So,
Right. Okay. So yeah, so that's what I was kind of, so it sounds like it's the same kind of draw, like the conflict, the drama, like any good story has conflict and has drama. And that's what these people were conveying. And so I can remember reading at least these mountaineering books and those kinds of things. And it's kind of like, wow, that person really had a harrowing experience. And part of me actually wants to have an experience too,
oh goodness, I
sort of
don't,
thing.
yeah, I don't,
Um,
oof.
but so that's where I was kind of asking about. But then I also realized that that was a limiting belief that I had to overcome
What's
in
that?
my own manifestation
That
process,
you love
is that it had
suffering?
to be hard,
Oh,
is that I had to suffer. Like
okay.
in order to get a desirable outcome, I had to suffer
Okay.
in some way to earn the outcome.
I'm just laughing now
You know
because,
what I mean?
well, no, I don't, that's your thing, but,
I don't know. I think that might be partly your thing too. I don't
it's
think
not
you want to admit it.
my own thing. So I remember years and years ago, like 20 years ago, hearing somebody, Wayne Dyer or something like this, talk about our fears and like identifying our fears. And I remember listening to the man on like a tape, like CD or whatever, and thinking, I don't have fears really. Like I don't have fears. I think you know me well enough now. I don't know if it's because I'm in my mid 40s or whatever. I'm like riddled with fears.
Plenty, plenty
Right.
of fears.
So, like, I'm listening to, and it's just sparking all of this, like, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm afraid of that. Like, I could identify so many fears. More in my middle age. I think in my 20s, I thought I was fearless, but
Mm.
maybe they were just in a closet waiting to have the door opened. I don't.
Yeah.
There
Well,
is something like really juicy about listening to a good story and human life. Like I think there's something in us that innately knows that life has conflict in it. So I'm
yes.
not
Yeah.
I'm not drawn to a story when I just hear the fluffy ending. Like I want to hear about the conflict. Humans want to hear about conflict. And I think that's part is innate in us. We understand that life is both, right?
Well, it has to be,
Well,
right?
but we don't think
That's
about
the
it like
hero's
that.
journey. I mean, that's the archetypical journey of life.
But we think about it sometimes like we get polarized in this idea that life can be a fantasy, like there's a place to get to where it's not like that,
Mm.
But I think that internally we really do know that that isn't life. So we're drawn to the wholeness of the whole story.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about the Matrix. Remember that part of the Matrix, or maybe it was the second movie where the architect of the Matrix was saying
Yes, the
they
second
had built the first Matrix they built was one that had no pain
utopia.
and it was a utopian experience, but that the human psyche kept rejecting it.
Yeah.
The human psyche needed conflict in some way to feel, to thrive, to whatever. And there's actually some neurophysiological data around that, right?
Yeah.
We need both challenge and support to thrive in our life. We need both sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system to thrive in our life. But that is, you're right. I mean, that's a part of the human experience.
Hey, speaking of this, I was thinking about this in terms of this topic about manifestation, which I don't think we talk about a whole lot. We talk about it with our students at our certification programs, but I want to bring it up real quick. In terms of manifestation and this wholeness of the human experience, we don't just love manifestation because it's manifestation. One of the reasons that we love it so much is it is a way to propel one's life to be the person you want to be in a really amazing way. So, what I mean by that is some people try to approach like let's say achievement, like getting something in their lives, and on the way forward we necessitates that we look back. We need to look at our conditioning, look how we were raised, look at our beliefs, what we've believed up until now and what we want to believe going forward. So looking ahead always necessitates in some way looking back. But there is this thing that you and I ran into, and I'll speak for myself now, in the healing kind of the healing arts, where it's almost like you think you can look back and just look back. And you and I found that in our practices when we went out on our own as alternative medicine professionals working in private practice that it was way better for the clients and for our business when we had an when we looked not only back but forward with our clients. So our client might come to us with a problem they want quote unquote healed, but it was the best approach to say, what do you want to actually achieve in your life?
Yep.
And so I think it's a fallacy that you can look back and just look back, because if you're just looking back, you're not going to get complete healing. If you want to look back, but you also are willing to look forward into what you want, who you want to be, what you want to have, what you want to achieve, what you want to do in your life, and you're willing to have that approach of looking forward to, you're going to have more complete healing on the back end. So I think it just goes back to this idea of like both sides. Manifestation is so powerful because it can help us to progress in our life. It can also help us to look forward when we're trying to heal something from the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would just add to that a little bit too. Some people say, well, don't look back at all. I don't want to talk about the past at all. I only want to look forward.
Right.
The problem with that is your present moment experience is a product of your past.
Exactly.
And if you don't understand how you got to where you are, then those patterns are going to project themselves into the future, and you're just going to keep getting the same thing that you've
Love it.
gotten now. So you can't not look back
Just look forward
and
and look
expect
back.
to get a different result in the future, because you have to
Exactly.
really understand how you got to where you are right now. That doesn't mean you need to dwell back there to your point, Ani, but you need to have all those perspectives in the proper ratio
Yeah.
of, of forward, present moment, past, in order to really manifest effectively.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's another reason why I love these stories is it paints a picture of all of that stuff and helps us to see manifestation in its completeness rather than its parts.
Yeah, yeah. So, ready to kick off with some case studies
Yeah,
here?
sure.
Yeah. So, my first case study, actually, both of my case studies have to do with health and healing. Actually, now that you bring it up, those are the two that kind of came to mind when I started thinking about this. But the first one is a story from a friend and colleague of ours named Reggie Hubbard. I just love Reggie. He's an amazing, amazing human being. I hope to have him on the podcast sometime in the future to maybe tell us this part of his story himself, and to share his wisdom also. So Reggie Hubbard is a yogi and peace activist, and he's also a musician. And I met Reggie a few years ago at Kripalu. Actually, we were teaching there at the same time. Reggie was there teaching a program for men of color, how to help them restore, relax, have deep rest. I was there teaching actually our core centering practitioner certification program. And I had a chance to meet with Reggie in the morning. And then we met with him again the following year, actually. So here's Reggie's story. He had a stroke. And so I met Reggie before he had the stroke a few years
And he's
ago.
young to have a
Yeah,
stroke.
Reggie's in
Like,
his, he's my age, right? So
it's young to have a
50s or
stroke.
something like
Yeah.
that. And so I had met him before he had his stroke. And then we went back a year later and we happened to be there again at the same time. And so when I saw him again a year later, I said, boy, he's moving kind of different. And it looks like he had something go on. So when we had a chance to connect with him, I said, hey, what's going on with you? We met a year ago. And since then, we've become, better friends, and we've stayed connected because of his experience that he's had. But this is Reggie's story. So Reggie had a stroke, and his left leg was completely paralyzed. He had a little bit of weakness in his left arm, but his left leg was completely paralyzed. He had a whole bunch of other neurological things that would happen, including uh, intense light sensitivity, and also certain sound sensitivity, especially when the sounds were very, I think he described them as chaotic, like traffic and phones ringing. That kind of stuff was intensely painful for him to experience. And so this was a wake up call for Reggie in a lot of ways, the stroke that he had. And when I asked him about it, I said, "What do you think was kind of the cause of this stroke?" And being a really active peace activist, he was actually pretty active in Obama's administration
Yeah.
in terms of rolling out a lot of equity issues and those types of things for people of color and minorities. And he really attributed this stroke to him going all out to really be there for other people, and at the same time, simultaneously, really embodying the toxicity of racism, living as a Black man in America. And so, I really loved hearing Reggie's perspective and his life and his experiences through that lens, but also through the lens of him being a yogi and a musician. Very unlikely yogi. He would say he's like the most unlikely yogi. He's a
Mhm.
really big individual, very large guy. And to be a yogi and a really kind of a large guy, he doesn't fit that typical yogi mold, right? Like
Right.
a thin, kind of lithe kind of person. And so he jokes about that. We've talked about that a lot, but this guy does headstands, he's doing all the yogis, trained for a really long time and done incredible deep work. And part of his healing was not only doing like a radical diet change, also really going into some deep meditative practices. But the other thing he used was a lot of sound healing. And so he used gongs primarily as like a primordial sound experience to vibrate, like change the vibrational frequencies of his physiology. And this second time we had met him after his stroke at Kripalu, one evening he did a public sampler and like filled up the Great Hall. There was 100 people or something with all of his gongs. So he has like 13 gongs or something that he travels with,
It was
and he just filled up
wild.
the Great Hall with these gongs and did this gong bath, and it was just you could
Primordial is a
feel the
perfect word.
primordial power of sound
Yeah. What?
and vibrational experience. And so he used this vibrational sound to reorganize his physiology and coupled that again with deep meditation experience to try to cleanse out a lot of that embodied the toxicity that he had embodied over that period of time. And now Reggie's back to traveling full time, working, teaching, but in a whole different way in his life. He's approaching his life and the world much differently than he had before. Not taking on as much stuff. But what I write about in the book with Reggie's experience is really around the idea of using sound as a transformational medium, especially primordial sound, which is different than music, which is again a lot of
Right.
the conversation that we have with Reggie. And when I talked with him, he had this quote for me that I want to share with you. He said, we talk too much as a society. Sound and silence are the keys to deep connection to source, self, and healing.
Mhm.
And that's one of his messages now
Mm.
as he goes forth and teaches. So I think about that a lot. I think about that conversation with him, that message a lot from him in terms of sound and silence are really the keys to deep connection. So
Mm.
not so much talking, but being in the silence and the primordial sound experiences and so that's just a story of really inspiring to me around health and healing, not only again using meditative and sound practices, but essentially Reggie reorganizes belief systems and his perceptions around health, healing, his body, his relationship with not only himself, his community, his culture, and with the country has really changed quite a bit.
One of the things that's so interesting about health manifestation, as I've witnessed it for so much of my career, is this idea that it really is a true collaboration with the universe or source if we'll allow ourselves to surrender our own ideas about who we think we are so that we can see who we could become. And I've so many times seen that as people have navigated health challenges and lent it to, shall we say, health success stories, like health manifestations,
Mm,
rather than getting just completely stuck for the remainder of their lives on that like repeated pattern of
yep.
victimization of their health, right? Um, the the letting go that is required to allow, which I think that's really what manifestation is. It's like this co-collaborative relationship. Like what could happen if I really do allow myself to be a creator, but not in the sense that I create as an individual ego, but like I create, and so does everything else around me. I'm creation happens through me, kind of thing.
Yeah. The other thing when I think about health manifestation, in the book, we write a section on health manifestation, wealth manifestation, and relationship manifestation. So you can kind of, plug into any of the section of the book that really speaks to you. One of the things we talk about with the health manifestation chapter is from a kind of like a physiological standpoint, from a point from A to B standpoint, health manifestation actually makes the most sense in terms of explainability,
Hmm.
right? Because we all know that you change your diet, your body changes. We
Hmm.
all know
Yeah,
that you
sure.
change your exercise, your body changes. So it shouldn't be a stretch to think that when I change something behaviorally, that my body will also change. We also know that you change your outlook on life, your body changes. There's plenty of research to show that when we practice things like gratitude or optimism, or when we laugh more, our body changes. Now, whether you want to call that healthier or not healthier, let's leave that aside. But your body changes, and that's pretty clear, and that's manifestation. Change your diet, you get a different manifestation in your body. So it's really interesting that that's the most clear kind of it's a little harder sometimes to explain, well, how does wealth manifest and how do relationships manifest, because there's something outside of us, but health is really like uniquely us,
Inside,
inside
inside.
of us. But it also is the one that is the most difficult to depersonalize from,
Hmm.
because it's so personal,
So personal, yeah.
right? And so you just talked about the idea of a victimization mindset, which is different than being a victim, like being victimized in life. We're talking victim mindset is different than being victimized in life. And when it comes to health manifestation, it's not only the one that has the clearest path between cause and effect, it's also the one that brings up the most stuff for people underneath, because you're dealing with cause and effect. And you must realize that you are the cause,
Yeah.
or your life is the cause of the effect that you're getting.
And one of the reasons people can't health manifest or have difficulties and stay stuck, and I'll give an example so you kind of know what I'm talking about here real quick, is this idea of not being able to depersonalize it, but instead blaming, whether it's blaming the disease or blaming the doctor or the cause or whatever, like not embracing the idea that I'm the cause. I know a story about somebody who got cancer as a teenager. And I mean, there's plenty of stories about people who got cancer and then changed their lives for the better, empowerment, created things from it, movements and missions and all of this stuff. But this person that I knew that got cancer as a teenager blamed the cancer, and for the next 30 years of life continue to blame the cancer on the victimization and why I can't. I can't because of the cancer 30 years ago. I can't because I'm broken. I was broken. This happened to me, kind of thing. And I think that's a real delineator that we've seen in health manifestations is this. And it just takes a tremendous amount of not taking things personally to come into a relationship with what happened in my life could actually empower my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I have a lot of uh gratitude's not the right word. I just think it's really impressive when people can kind of get out of their own way enough to embrace their life like that.
Yeah.
There's so many stories. I've been around so many people, whether they're going to get better or not, because we talk about that in the book too, the difference between healing and curing, because both of us have been around plenty of people who are terminal and they still heal their lives,
Mhm. Yeah.
it's just such an inspiring and impressive human condition to claim life in that way.
Yeah. So I have another story around the health. Are your stories that you're bringing health focused? Or the
No.
okay? So let's do another health one, and we'll bounce it over to you.
Okay,
Does
sure.
that make sense?
Sure.
We'll kind of compartmentalize what we're doing here. So we're already on the health topic.
Love it.
Okay. So
Okay.
the other manifestation story that I want to share, I experienced. Gosh, this is 30 years ago now, when I was a young therapist at Craig Hospital. If you've been listening to the podcast for any period of time, like you've heard that stories around one of my very first jobs in physical therapy was working at Craig Hospital, which is a world-renowned rehab center for people rehabilitating from spinal cord and traumatic brain injury. And I had a patient at the time who actually also had a stroke. And he was, I don't remember how old this guy was, but it was probably in his 50s. It's probably in his 50s. And so it's probably like around my age now that I think about it, sort of thing. And so he had a stroke, and it was a pretty severe stroke. And he had a paralysis on one side of his body. I don't remember which it was, but he couldn't walk. And his prognosis was pretty crummy. Like, the doctors are like, listen, he's not going to walk again. Like, it's pretty dense. It's a pretty dense stroke. Arm wasn't working well. And I remember when I was first doing my intake with him and asking him, some things about himself and what was important about his life. He basically just said, Brian, we just got to stop talking for a second. I got to tell you this. Like, my daughter is getting married in a few months,
Oh boy.
and I'm going to walk her down the aisle.
Oh geez.
And I'm like,
Get out the tissue boxes,
I'm
folks.
like, okay. I mean, I'm a young PT. The doctors are telling me this character is not going to walk again. I didn't have the heart to tell him, no, you're not. But I was like,
Yeah.
all right. He's like, listen, I've been talking about this with my daughter since she was a little girl,
Yeah.
and I'm going to walk her down the aisle. And I'm like, all right, all right. And so he shows up like every day for physical therapy with that attitude. He's like, when are we going to walk? I'm walking my daughter down the
Yeah.
aisle, and he's counting it down. Like,
Yeah.
this is how many weeks we have left until I got to walk her down the aisle, sort of thing.
Right.
So, and he's showing up for every one of his rehab things. Occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, rehab, recreational therapy, the MAC classes we did, exercise classes. He's like on time, ready to go every single time, even if he doesn't feel well. His wife's there with him, and he's like, I'm walking her down the aisle. And he was like committed to this. And nobody really believed him to begin with. The doctor, we're doing our rounds, and the doctor's like, do we need to have a conversation with him from neuropsychology about his
Right.
unrealistic kind of expectations? And the neuropsych's like, no, let's just kind of like, it's okay right now, kind of thing. And then pretty soon, like, he's not like just slumped over in his wheelchair anymore. He's sitting up in his wheelchair. And now all of a sudden he's helping with the transfers. And I'm like, wow, he's exceeding like
Yeah.
what's going. And all of a sudden now people are like, the doctor's like, you know
Maybe
what?
he's gonna do
Maybe,
it.
I don't know. We're not sure yet, but
Yeah.
it's going to be some promising results, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then so everybody's now enlisting. Now
Yeah.
as he's coming down to therapy, like the nurses are going to walk your daughter down
Yeah.
down the aisle. He's like, that's right. Like, so now everybody's like on board with him, right?
That's
And
the
it's
best.
starting to happen. It's starting to happen. So the the wedding's getting closer. He's still not like, he's taken some steps. Like, he's actually like in the parallel bar standing and that kind of stuff. And he's able to do some standing. And it's getting closer. And I remember he was time to go discharged home, right? And so he's going to be discharged home. He's still going to come back as an outpatient, and he still had a couple of weeks before the wedding was going to happen. And I remember wheeling him as he was being discharged. We wheeled him to the front doors of the hospital, and he stopped me. He said, "You're not going to wheel me out of this hospital. I'm going to walk out of this hospital." And so we got him a walker, and we walked him out of the front doors of the hospital into the car that his daughter was waiting in
My
to
God.
pick him up.
Oh,
And
jeez.
I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God, like, it's happening. Like,
Yeah.
and so he came back for a couple of weeks of outpatient therapy, and we started walking with a hemi cane and that kind of stuff. And he walked his daughter down the aisle. And there was not a dry eye in the whole, in the whole church,
Yeah.
and it was like, so as a young, like in my 20s, to see that possible, that happened, to defy those odds and to be so committed to something that was so important to him.
Yeah.
And literally his body, his purpose was driving
Yeah.
his body, and his body could not help but respond to that in such a powerful way. And then to have the community kind of end up rising up and supporting him and being like, just, cheering him on every step of the way. even though it looked like there were some rough days, along the path for him. But that was really powerful for me. And that really transformed my understanding of, wow, it's really about not what other people believe. It's about what you believe.
Yeah.
And if you can be just like resolved in
Yeah.
your belief,
Whew.
then you can alter reality of what other people think is possible.
I think one of the things that's striking to me about that story is what an amazing story
Yeah.
is how much humans are meaning makers. And when we think about manifestation, a lot of the times we think about I need to change my thoughts,
Hmm.
and thoughts are so flimsy, but meaning
Yeah.
has deep, deep
Right.
roots.
Purpose. Yeah. Meaning and purpose.
Deep, deep roots. I remember I was talking to a client. This is not a full blown story, but I remember talking to a client who wanted to, they had hired me to help them grow their business, but they were working way too hard and stressing out a lot. And they knew they needed to exercise more and make time for that in their day, but they were just working so hard. And I knew family meant so much to them. And by the way, like the biggest reason they were working so hard is so they could support their
Hmm.
family. And so we had a conversation about how if you don't take care of your body in 10, 20 years, what kind of dad are you going to be? First of all, what kind of example are you setting to your kids right now? Do you want them to be in your position where you're just working your ass off and you're not taking care of your body when they're in their 50s? And when you're 60 and 70 and you're ailing because you didn't pay attention to your body, what kind of pressure is that going to put on them? And that meaning around reorganizing behavior, so profound. Meaning is what drives
Mhm.
us.
Yeah.
My stories are those were like the manifestation stories that they write books about, and the manifestation stories that I brought are more day-to-day
Mhm.
kinds of stories. And I think that's part of the thing with health manifestation too, is health manifestation really can have this Hollywood effect to it,
Hmm.
which sometimes everyday manifestation people can overlook the everyday miracles that happen in their lives because they aren't so sensational, maybe. So not naming any names, I'm thinking of a manifestation with a client who, again, was working with me to grow their business. People who are in primary partnership, which is just about everybody that I work with has some kind of partner. Um, and most of the people I work with are women. The conversation about growing business lends itself towards the personal relationship they're having with their primary partner at some point in our relationship all the time. And I think part of that is as women, I don't know how man experiences it. I just don't experience it the same when I'm working with male clients. It's almost like male clients can talk about business and not have to talk about what's going on at home. But the female clients, female identified clients are always talk to me about what's going on at home because it gets in the way of what they're trying to do with their business is kind of like how it comes up. So anyway, was working with somebody who was having trouble with their primary partner at home and really trying to focus on business, but the primary partnership was taking a lot of mental, emotional energy. And what she was trying to do was get the partner to change. And so one of the things that I talk about with my clients who are having trouble with their partners is like keeping your eyes on your own paper and kind of disentangling them from how they get really wrapped up in other people's stuff. And it's not just partners, because people get wrapped up in like the stuff with their mother, the stuff with their kid or their dog or whatever. They get wrapped up in stuff. And so keeping your eye on your own paper and allowing somebody else to have their experience. So the partner was they were having a lot of personal conflict that was getting in the way, and this is more of a relationship manifestation story, even though it has a wealth component to it too. So the conflict was really getting in the way of her mental emotional space, and there was a lot of like blaming that was going on, and the conversation we started having was about how he would blame and then she would get defensive, and then the two of them were locked in this drama triangle thing, which we talk about in the Manifestation for Dummies book. We do some work with the drama triangle, which is really profoundly great way to work on relationship dynamics. And so what she started to do was, instead of getting caught up in the drama triangle when there was blame to get defensive and then be in all that drama, was she started to disentangle herself from the drama triangle, and if she was getting blamed, not get defensive anymore. And it was about maybe like 4 days. They had been locked in this cycle throughout their entire relationship, by the way, where the blame would happen, the defensiveness would happen, they get in conflict, they'd make amends, they'd decide to stay together, and then it would happen again over and over again. It was a pattern. But what happened was, and this happens all the time too with the ladies, like they wish their male counterpart was doing more personal work for themselves. I hear that all the time. Like, I wish they were doing the work that I was doing. I've never said that. Anyway, so she stopped getting defensive, and about 3 or 4 days passed. And what happened was the whole dynamic shifted, and he got kind of quiet, and then he came to her and apologized for the projection and said that he was really interested in her experience and wanted to have a conversation about it, and had been doing his own work to get to the place where he developed his own insight. And that manifestation was so cool because she wanted to be in a relationship where her male counterpart was doing their own work and then could develop insight, and her not have to be a part of that process. And that is exactly what happened when she was able to release her defensiveness. So, it wasn't something she had to do. She had to release the defensiveness and really hold a vision for the relationship, which was a big deal because what had been happening was when the conflict would happen, both of them would kind of get in this place of maybe we shouldn't be together. And so holding the vision for the relationship while letting go of the defensiveness, and that allowed this breakthrough to happen.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. So it really makes me think about one of those kind of key things we talk about in a dynamic like that or a pattern like that is if just one person changes what they're doing, then it changes the pattern automatically. Right. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, so just that idea of dis dropping the rope, right? We call about kind of just talk about in terms of
Tug of
dropping
war.
tug of war. If you know tug of war, if you just drop the rope, then the
There's no tug
game's
of
kind of
war.
over. No tug of war anymore, and it changes the dynamic somehow, and change is on the way to good, right? Change is on the way to better.
Difference
So you just create a
on the way to
difference by
better.
doing that.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, great story.
Yeah, it's a great story. The other story that I brought for you to talk about today to share with the listeners is a wealth manifestation story that I just think is kind of fun. And like I said, it's kind of a simple one, but it's
Mhm.
also, um, it's definitely been life changing and super funny. Again, I'm not going to mention names. If you're listening, you know who you are. It's one of my favorite stories to tell now. This person had also hired me to help them to grow their business, and they had had a lot of resistance to the things that business owners, especially new business owners, typically have resistance to, like reaching out, talking about what they do, connecting with potential clients, and having conversations. And so they were working on that. And a lot of programming about perfectionism and needing to do things right. And so, how do you do things right in business? Well, first you like reach out, and then you say the right words, and then you have the right conversation, and then you move the conversation to a sales conversation, and then you sign the contracts, and then right, this is like linear kind of quote unquote right way that it goes. So anyway, my client's doing this great work to get herself to the place where she's able to reach out, and she's able to host her own events and all of this stuff. And she decides that she is going to go take a vacation, and she's had like all of this pre-work, but nothing's really landed. And so she's on her way to vacation. I think it was like the way to the airport or something like this. And she gets a text from a client that a deal's gonna land. And she tells me, she's like, oh my gosh, I'm on my way to vacation and this deal's landing. And oh my God, why is this happening now? And I was like, Dude, you're on your way to vacation and a deal's landing? This is amazing. Like, love it. Like, say yes, say you'll send the contract or whatever, go on vacation. You just closed a deal. Well, now the running joke is she closes at least one deal every time she goes on vacation.
Right. Yeah.
Every time she goes on vacation, somebody contacts her either out of the blue or somebody she's been working on and closes a deal. But people have landed out of the blue every time she goes on vacation. So the running joke is if she needs money, she needs to go on vacation and a deal will close. And then I say, as I tell everybody this, story because it's one of my favorites. Like, don't you wish this was your subconscious pattern? I am working on this one myself. I want this to be my life where every time I go on vacation, a deal closes. I just love it. It's so great.
Yeah, cool. It's
Yeah.
great. I love that one.
Isn't
I
that
love
fun?
one. Yeah. So thanks so much for taking some time on this week's podcast to listen to some stories. Hopefully they've inspired you, got you excited, got you curious, interested, motivated, any of those things to want to learn more about what your manifestation potential is and what your story is going to be. If you were to write your own manifestation story, what would that sound like?
Yeah. And there's lots of stories in just the right sections of Manifestation for Dummies. It's not one of those books that you read that you're reading like a storybook all the way through with some lessons. It's like a reference book that you can go through and pick out the right sections for you, and there will always be stories to supplement your learning. And of course, if you haven't pre-ordered your book yet, go ahead and do that. When you do, you're going to get a ticket to the event that we're running on July 1st, 2026, to share more manifestation stories so that you can see yourself through those stories and see how these stories play out in manifestation so you can do it too.
Yep. So thanks for joining us again this week on the podcast. We're so grateful that you are here. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself.
Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time.